Hey, I'm Ryan with Warner Discovers, and today I'm going to show you converting my Mini-ITX desktop build over to a 1U server rack case build. I definitely ran into a train wreck of problems, and I showcased going through all those steps that I took. I ended up having issues with fitment for the motherboard, the CPU cooler, the I/O shield, a variety of cabling issues. Learned a lot along the way about converting from the desktop to the 1U server. It's definitely clear to me now that there are specific Mini-ITX server mobos that I would highly recommend looking into if you're gonna look into doing this similar kind of thing. But I'm really happy moving over to this 1U size case. I've taken it out of the rack multiple times, and it's so easy to just unscrew the front here, slip off the top, and make your changes that you want to make. This is the Inwin RF100S case, and it came with a power supply. And if you want to see that unboxing, I do that in this other video. I'll also link all of the things that I used in the video down below. Anything that helps anybody convert over, feel free to ask me any questions, and hope this helps. So I have the RF100S here. This is it open. I'm about to swap around the internals so that I can have the I/O on the front, as well as the USB on the front, and then put this in the back. So I'm just taking off the ears first here. So I switched around the rack ears and rotated it. Next thing I'm going to do, referencing the PDF, is this is the same direction, and they have steps here on which one to do. And next I'm going to take out the power supply and take off the control module, and then switch those two positions. So I took out those 3 screws here for the power supply, and there was also 2 screws under here that I took off, and now this is loose. So I took off the other 3 screws here for the control module, and now this comes off here, and then we can swap the position. So the control module out, just the fans here, and what they suggest next is to unscrew the fan wall and reverse to change the flow. You can see here they swap it. So I'm going to turn this around. One cool feature, I haven't really played with a lot of server cases, but you can easily take out the fan like this and swap them in there. Really convenient. Okay, so I took the 2 screws out from the side, flipped it around, and now the airflow is reversed like they suggest. And now I'm going to install the power supply and the control board. All right, so I have the control module installed over here, and you can see the USB has sort of a pretty decent angle. I think that this should be fine. I also think you could probably reverse these so that they're upside down. You know, I think that this should be fine, as well as if it was the other way, it would kind of go right into the motherboard. So I'm going to see if this can, you know, just be situated with the front connectors as well. It's gonna get tight. All right, so I got the fan reversed, I got the PSU where the controller module is, so those are swapped. So now the back of the board will face the front with the controller board, and it's all turned around according to the directions. I do have a slight concern with the power supply nest here, but we'll have to see what we get into when we put the motherboard inside. Okay, so I got my current server. You can see here the I/O shield might not fit in there, so I don't know if I'm just gonna modify it. Let's get ready to take this apart and put it in there. All right, we got the motherboard out. It's ready to go in here. I gotta change the CPU cooler. I got a smaller Silverstone 65 watt. That is a low profile that should fit in this case based on my research. And then I have another RAM stick that's going to go in here because I have another slot open, so I thought might as well. So I took out the I/O shield like I was talking about in the other video, and you can see that it is just too tall to go in here. The motherboard will slip in here, but I might just get some tin snips and cut off the top. So I ended up having to modify this I/O shield, cut off a little bit of the side, a little bit of the top, and now I'm just going to have to stick it here, and then the motherboard can just push against it, and it seems to be fine. And it'll look fine for the most part over here. So I got the motherboard in, I got the new CPU fan on. I had to modify the backplate because of this motherboard, which is really annoying. And then I have the IO shield there. We'll hook some more of this up. So an oversight on my part. This board only has one chassis fan, so I'm gonna need to get a splitter to plug in multiple. Didn't think about that. So I got everything in, got the hard drive, cables are really tight. I'll line over here. Definitely a tight fit. So here's the case running. These fans are really loud, which I'm a little surprised. But you can see the cutout IO board, or the IO shield. And yeah. Here it is in the rack, booted up. So you have the Ethernet cable with a switch right here. Hard drive LEDs. I wasn't able to keep this plugged in. It's too much of an angle, so I'm gonna have to go back in there. I think I'm gonna have to get an adapter or something. But that's it. So I took the server out again. The fans are so loud. I have it in the server room behind a closed door, and I can still hear it. So I ordered some new Noctua fans, and it's gonna replace both of them. I also got a splitter, which I think these might already come with. And then I also got a USB flexible cable to try to plug in the front, because I couldn't get it to plug in the board and have it flex well enough to sit in there. So we'll see what we can do. So I'm going to show you one more time how loud these fans are. I have it plugged in right now before I change them. So just looking at these Noctua fans, you can see it has a braided cable, and it's gonna go basically on the original mount, so we won't have these separate wires going on here, and there might be an adapter in here that I might not have to keep that other Y splitter for. So normally this fan was running at like 13,000 RPM, and now using this low noise adapter, it is now running at 6,500 RPM. Alright, so some things I have learned here. We have this low noise adapter from Noctua's fans that are able to put this fan basically at half reduction. It runs at about 6,500 instead of the 13,000 that I was getting. And then if I actually put this splitter on the noise reductor and plug in two fans, they both run at about 3,300 RPM, essentially having both power. So at this point, I think I'm gonna order two PWM fans that can be controlled from like 1,000 RPM to 1,500 RPM. So mainly the problem here is that the 40-40-28 fans that are included are not 4-pin, they're just 3-pin, so they can't be controlled. And that means they'll run at full speed the whole time. So I can either use this splitter to have them, so I could have two fans running at approximately 6,500 RPM, which the noise was fine, or I can order two fans that are 4-pin PWM and be controlled. So I'll have to evaluate what I want to do here, but for now I might just use the splitter to have the power and run both of these at 6,500 RPM and see how the noise is. I'll also move this hard drive over here because this is definitely a difficult space situation, and it's obviously a 1U case, so it is definitely going to be tight. Okay, so I have both fans on a splitter. You can hear them running. It didn't reduce the power. Must be something with the lowering of the fan speed. You can hear the two fans running, and they're running at 1290, 1300 RPM. At this point, I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. I could get a low noise adapter that reduces it by 40 to 50%, put it in line here, and do the two fans. But then I don't know exactly what that means in terms of fan speed at the end, and I can't control it. Alternatively, I could order two new 4-pin PWM fans, which I think I might do instead, because if this splitter is going to work and control these at the same speed, then it's probably better off doing that and being able to adjust it. This has been quite the journey trying to figure this out. Just keep running into roadblocks, and yeah, I'll probably talk about it in the end. For now, I did move the 3.5-inch hard drive from here to here. I can kind of see why the other 1U cases might have a little more flexibility in terms of room, but for now, if I were to put another hard drive in, I would definitely do 2.5, get some smaller SATA cables. I have an extension here for the front USB. I zip tied the front control board over here. I zip tied the USB 3.0 right here. I have the fans away from the fans over here. SATA cable zip tied. This PCI Express slot was definitely getting a little bit in the way of the 3.5 drives here. So definitely gonna, probably just consider 2.5 drives if I were to do something in here. So I have a few new things here. I have 2 of the 4-pin fans that I ordered to replace these fans that run at max RPM. So we'll see how these go. I have a couple new SATA cables that are shorter because I don't like the length of this. One of these is a left angle, one of these is a right angle. So I'm hoping that I can replace some of these in a more organized fashion. I also got some shorter straight cables if those don't work like I like. And then I also got this interesting SATA adapter, which they have different angles. So you can basically plug them in and then have a completely different angle to go at it. Since this is such a sharp turn above the height, you can see it's kind of pressed down. But I don't think that this space is going to work because of this heat block here, so we'll see what we find. So this SATA adapter did not work with the heat block. I figured it might not be enough room, but it was worth trying, and I had never seen this before. This pack of SATA cables, the short SATA cables that I got, have a smaller head on them, so they're a little more flexible as well, and so the height clearance is definitely more tolerable here than something that I already had, which is kind of stiff and all that. I also had this left and right angle. This works, but I just don't think it's worth keeping at the moment. I think I'll probably just end up using 2 of these and returning the angles, but it's good to know that they have these. I sort of wish they had one I could find, but it was out of stock where it actually goes immediately right or immediately left. For some reason, nobody's making those right now. So I got the shorter SATA cables there. Should be much better than them tied up over here. And then I have these new Arctic 40 by 40 by 28 fans, which fit the mount, unlike the Noctuas. And then this piece will go on top of that. And I have the second one here, and we'll see how these work out. All right, so we got the 2 fans in here, and we're just gonna strap these down. This is the fan. We'll put this in the description, and let's see how these run with the RPMs. All right, so we got the fans running, and I tuned the fans in the BIOS here. So you can see the chassis fans are running at 5,200 RPM, CPU fans running at 3,400. If I go over to the tuning, you can see that the CPU fan's at just standard and the chassis fan's at silent. If I put it to standard, it'll jump up. Right now, I think 5,200 will be fine. I'll just kind of monitor the motherboard temperature. Right now it's at 24, but I think this should be fine. If it does get higher than these specific temps, it'll jump up anyway. I think it'll be fine. Keep an eye on it. If I do standard, it'll bump up pretty significant amount. It definitely was not as loud as the last ones, but they do get loud. Yeah, I think leaving it on standard should be good. So we'll see how that goes. So I got the server back in there, super quiet, just as I was hoping. It's probably running at 5,000 to 6,000 RPM, and if it needs to go higher, it will. It's got the speed to do that. It can go up to, I think, 15,000 RPM, which is great, but now I can't hear it when, I'm outside of this room. So the server's been running really well with all the components in it, and it's really tidied up. But one of the things that I really didn't like was the CPU cooler was sort of bending the motherboard because I had to modify it underneath because it didn't really sit flush. So I ended up finding a server Mini-ITX motherboard that fit my current processor on eBay for a pretty good price. And then I found the right CPU cooler that I probably should be using for a 1U system. I'll show it right here. So I have the new Mini-ITX server motherboard. You can see there's dual gigabit Ethernet, USB 3.0, a variety of ports. And then we have the Dynatron K2, which will replace the low profile cooler. And then I have a new RAM stick to put in here since it's a different length. So I have the new motherboard installed. There's a little more space in here. The RAM stick is smaller, so there's a little more space over near the fans. The 24-pin motherboard power cables over here, so it's a little more convenient to plug in, as well as the other power cable. You have the two chassis fans that can plug directly into the motherboard, so I no longer need this splitter. I also don't need this USB 3.0 flexible because there is no 3.0 on here, so I might get an adapter for the 2.0 to 3.0 so I can use these front USBs, but I have the new heatsink, and I'll probably want to get a shorter SATA cable for this since my other cable was not long enough, just barely short. So alright, so we got the new motherboard up and running. See the BIOS here, posted, can boot into Ubuntu. I think that there's an issue with the Ethernet. Upgrading the motherboard, there might be some sort of configuration change, but I'll have to figure that out, but it's all running. What's also nice is because we have two fans on the motherboard, you can now see that each speed and how efficient it's running. So here is the IO shield with the new motherboard. Thankfully this IO shield fit and it looks really great. Much better than the cut aluminum that I ended up doing. So really happy with this, and it also has dual Ethernet in case I want to get crazy. I doubt I'll do it. So I'll probably end up ordering the shorter SATA cable as well as the USB 2.0 adapter just because it's in there, why not? But for now, see how it goes. Another huge bonus that I didn't have before is the LAN LED, which was not on the other motherboard. With the server ITX boards, you do have LAN LEDs 1 and 2, and it's great that there's an indicator for that, which is just a nice touch. So one of the last things I was going to do in here was change out these SATA cables. This is just too long. This one just sort of barely fits. I have some 8-inch blue SATA cables that are really thin, so I'm going to put these in there, as well as change out the front USB here. Unfortunately, with the new motherboard, this only has 2.0, so I have this adapter here that'll plug into the motherboard, and this should go on that end there. All right, so I have the SATA cables connected here, the 8-inch cables. I wish there was like a 7-inch cable because then it'd be a perfect length. We have the 3.0 adapter here going into the USB 2.0 header. So now the front two USBs will work. So I'm pretty happy with how these things are laid out. It's really clean in here. Just tuck this. Still room. I would be happy putting more hard drives in here now that we have more room with the ATX 24-pin power over here, the 4-pin over here. It's all sort of jammed up in this area, but then we have all the power connectors for the SATA over here. Fans sort of wrapped around themselves, with one of them going over here and the other one going back up over here at the front, and the new CPU cooler. But pretty happy with how this is laid out, so I'm gonna put this back in and probably won't take it out for a little while. So we got the 1U all tidied up with the last SATA cable and adapter that I wanted to put in here. So I'm gonna put this back just to kind of go over the issues that running into. Firstly, the IO shield. Tried to modify that. Wasn't really happy with how it looked. I figured it'd be fine, but ended up running into the issue with the power cable for the motherboard not fitting right, just because of the way some of these server mobos are laid out. You can see with the new one that I got, the 24-pin was on the right-hand side, so it was a lot easier to stuff that all in the front here, closer to the power supply, and then everything else sort of freed up around the fans and everything like that. Buying the new fans Obviously I bought the wrong 40mm fans that weren't compatible with the 40x40x28 fans that go in here. I also didn't realize the fans were only 3-pin instead of 4-pin, and with the 4-pin you have speed control for all those fans, especially with a server Mobo that has multiple chassis fans for the Mini-ITX. So those are able to be controlled. Once I got the new fans in there, it sounds great running at like 6,000 to 7,000 RPM as opposed to something like 14,000 RPM, which just sounded crazy loud. Another hiccup with this is CPU cooler. I got a low profile CPU cooler, which again, I'll link all in the description. The CPU cooler worked great when I did have it installed, but I did have to cut the bottom because there was an issue with the bottom of the motherboard and how it mounted. Specifically for this processor, I was looking for the push pin type CPU cooler. So once I found the new 1U cooler, which I'll also link below, that had the push pins and it was a great height, everything just sort of worked better. I still had to push the CPU cooler onto the motherboard before screwing it down because I was running into a little bit of fitment at the bottom, but once I had the cooler on, screwed down the motherboard, it was totally fine. So after getting most of it all set, I just was bothered by the I/O shield, and then I started looking at new motherboards, and then at that point I sort of decided I'm going to switch over to the motherboard. Luckily, I'm running Linux, and switching CPUs and RAM and processors or anything like that seems to be pretty clean. So basically the only thing that's left in here from this was actually the processor and the hard drives. Everything else, the RAM, I needed to get new RAM for the motherboard because it was short sticks, like SODIMM RAM sticks that go onto here, so I couldn't use those anymore. But definitely happy I made the jump over, and now I know, and hopefully this helps anyone else running into similar issues or looking for any specific equipment. I definitely liked finding the Jetway motherboards, which is one of the ones that I picked. Found one on eBay, and they have sort of long-term support. So the motherboard that I picked up on eBay, I think is still being supported until like 2030 for this Intel 6th generation processor that I have. So we'll continue to be looking at those in the future. Easily upgradable if I want to go to something like the 11th or 12th gen Intel or anything in the future. But this was quite a learning journey, and definitely am glad I was playing around with this stuff. So let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.